friends. Welcome to Art in the Raw, Conversations with Creative People. Tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to sculptor Laird Hovland. If you're a regular here, it's great to see you. And if this is your first time watching, long story short, I have been in love with art and music pretty much as long as I can remember. I've now been working in the professional gallery world for about 16 years, and I started Art in the Raw about halfway through 2020 to keep people inspired. If you see value in that, consider subscribing and telling like-minded friends. If you'd like to know a little bit more about me, tonight's guest, or the show, take a look at the description below. Thanks for joining us tonight. Looks like you're in your studio.
I am in my studio in Santa Fe, Siler Road neighborhood.
Excellent. There's a lot of amazing artist studios in that area.
That's a secret. Don't anybody tell anybody.
As I understand it, you have done foundry work for other well-known artists. You have been making your own work. Now you're represented by a number of galleries. Canyon Road, another one in Martha and Taos.
I've been an artist since my mid-teens. I was really lucky where I went to school in Montana. At the time, the arts were very valued, and I somehow managed to have a schedule of 4 art classes, band, and English my last 2 years of high school. So I was going to be an artist. There wasn't really much doubt at that point because math and science weren't really working. And my mentor in high school recommended I meet and study under his teacher in Santa Barbara, a little college in Montecito outside of Santa Barbara, California. So I went and studied under him. Then went back to Bozeman after a year or two down in Santa Barbara, and didn't really have a big plan in my early 20s. And a high school art teacher bought into a foundry and asked if I wanted to work in it. He knew I was still making on my own and asked if I wanted to work in a foundry. And I was like, yeah, sure. What foundry? I'm still doing foundry work. I'm self-employed. Work for Dwight Hackett Art Foundry about a block from here over on Industrial, where the maker space is now. It was my first job in Santa Fe, and worked for some really top-notch artists there. Cheeky Smith, Bruce Nauman, who's a local, Susan Rothenberg, his wife, Juan Yos, some really great blue chip artists that I got to see how they work, and I got to produce their work, doing wax work for castings. And my work is about casting. The bronze work refers to the casting process.
And you work in a number of different processes.
I'm drawing my work in a 3D drawing program. I took some classes out at the community college in CAD and the ArtCAD, very expensive programs. And I'm using SketchUp, which is a whole lot cheaper, until I needed all the bells and whistles. So yeah, I'm drawing on the computer, and some of it I'm 3D printing or having it 3D printed. I fabricate in steel primarily, occasionally bronze. I have my drawings in a CAD program and send all my dimensions to Choice of Reliance Steel, and they cut all my parts. My recent piece that I'm finishing up now is 137 parts.
Oh, wow. And then you weld them together.
Yes.
137 parts you would have drawn.
Yeah, I do all the drawing in a digital program these days. I think I have some pencils somewhere too. I used to do these things with rulers and protractors and compasses, but it's really hard to get very small. And the more complicated I get, I need to be a little tighter as I've gotten more complicated. My style has changed as well.
Sure. The digital versus analog conversation tends to come up frequently, but I think it's interesting in that with mediums like photography, that's a more obvious thing, digital photography versus film. But I don't feel like a lot of people are thinking about that as often when they're looking at other mediums. A lot of those tools have become pretty predominant, but I don't know that the general public thinks about that.
It's hard to get galleries to show this stuff. The digital 3D printed stuff. I've made molds and used those to do small bronzes, and those are good, but it's galleries that are hesitant to show the 3D prints because it's not really an established media.
It's interesting that you say that, because I want to say 15, 20 years ago, that's where photography was with digital. And now people expect digital prints. And if they see something that's printed using an analog process. Not to say that they're confused, but they need an explanation
Right.
behind it. And I know a lot of photographers that for years galleries wouldn't touch their digital works. That's still the situation with sculpture.
At least in the sculpture world that I'm in. I'm also doing jewelry, and some of that is 3D printed in metal.
I was looking at that, and that was another thing I found intriguing is that your work sometimes exists in monumental size, but then you also have smaller desk-sized pieces, but then jewelry as well.
I'd have something that visually, aesthetically, I think it'll work at absolutely any scale, and jewelry is one.
So I would imagine utilizing the digital tools makes that a little more possible.
Word. Some of it
Yeah.
was just absolutely impossible without the printing. But it's cast from a the print. Let me grab one.
Yeah, please.
Here's some examples. That's cast from a print. So printed in wax and then cast in lost wax process from a print. And this piece, that's printed in steel.
So
Yeah.
the other one was printed in wax and then cast, but that one's just printed in straight steel. That's wild.
Yeah. How's that impossible? I don't know. But
I'm not extra sure.
they use a powdered steel. It's like an inkjet printer. Well, they lay a thin layer of the powdered steel out and then print one layer, then lay another thin layer of powdered steel over it. And then after the thing is printed, it's got that binder in there. Somehow the binder is replaced, making the piece fully metal, completely metal. Now that's the part I don't understand.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm really loving that technology.
I wanted to show you something. My buddy, Edward Bateman, who's a photographer, he also teaches at the University of Utah. He makes these 3D print rabbits with the medium format camera. And I recently learned the University of Utah was one of the origin places for 3D digital printing, the whole teapot model. Can't claim to be an expert, but
I am not an expert at all, but I can draw pieces that can be printed.
it's worth looking up.
I cast my first piece of jewelry when I was in high school, or it's not foreign to work in that scale. But yeah, now I've quite a few pieces in that tiny scale. But before that, I was pretty much just 4 to 6 inches was as small as I'd made anything. And 12 by 12 feet is about as big as I'd made anything. It's big enough for now.
For now, you say, right?
Yeah. It's hard to move wide load.
Going back to the digital analog thing, one of my pet peeves is there's this weird thought process where people think anything digital, but the tool is somehow responsible for the
Yeah.
creation of the image. And you use a hammer to build a house, but the hammer didn't come up with the design for the house.
Yeah, that's a funny one because they look at the prints as if the machine did everything. And I just somehow transmitted magically from my brain to this machine rather than actually making the piece. But I'm using my hand to do it.
Right. But if you could just magically send that information to the machine from your brain, that would be kind of cool too, right?
Even better.
Yeah. You just imagine it. And
The way it is, it's got to be pretty tight and kind of perfect. And it's not really my style. So if I could just transmit it mind to machine, I could have more of the human features, if you will.
I feel like that's coming next. I found a video from the reporter from a show that you had had in a gallery that was an old grocery store.
Yeah, my friends Josh and Melissa put on these shows. They're realtors. Spaces that were for sale largely, and they used them to showcase art and have live music. It was pretty cool. And at the time, I didn't have a gallery. So it was a nice way to get shown, creative way to get shown.
You're showing in a few different galleries.
I'm in a Tierra Mar at 225 Canyon here in Santa Fe, and then Hyden's House. It's on the main drag there. And Esperanza Projects in Marfa. Jennifer Esperanza, the photographer that used to live in Santa Fe for ages, has a shop down in Marfa where she shows my work and vintage stuff.
That's cool. I didn't know that. She's one of those names in Santa Fe that even if you don't know her, you know of her. And I hadn't heard about her in a while, but I thought maybe it was just the pandemic.
She's got a shop right on the main street there. It's a classic building, City Hall.
Always wanted to go. I don't know why I have not been yet.
Well, there's not a lot there.
No, but it has a strangely large art scene for a town that is small.
Yeah, it's all about the art. tiny little
Mhm.
town. They like the rusty steel down there, so I like them.
In this day and age, I think it's easier for artists to be self represented. However, as you know, there are a lot of administrative and shipping and tasks and a lot of other things you have to tackle. So that trade off is having more time to actually work on the art.
There's a lot of tools available for me to market myself, but that's mostly over my head and pay grade. So
You want to make the art,
I do.
not
That's
answer the emails.
pretty much all I want to do. Yeah. I did talk to someone that's interested in buying work for future developments. They came to me, and that would be a wonderful prospect in the future.
Future developments?
Yeah, like home developments.
Okay. Okay. You do have a lot of pieces that are public projects.
I have had a few pieces in public. I've got a couple pieces in Bozeman, Montana, and there's one out at Dara Village. There's one further up Canyon, the convention center for a while. So yeah, they work well in public places.
Going back to the gallery thing, not everybody's comfortable in galleries. So when you're able to have public art projects, it opens up the work to a larger demographic.
A lot of people I don't expect to like my work, like it, and people I might wish did don't. Interesting to me to see who relates to my work.
Have you ever just hung out on the corner by a public piece and watched people?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's fun. I went to pick a piece up in Bozeman a couple of years ago, bring it down here for the gallery here. I went to get it, and there's a little family there, and the kid was inside the piece. I was happy to see the interaction.
That's
So
cool.
I'm sure the parents wouldn't have let him climb in it had they known the artist was
Okay.
going.
Some of your pieces are bronze and solid form, and some of them feel more like a line drawing.
The larger pieces, they're plate steel,
Mm.
plate bronze on some of them. And then, yeah, I do the line drawing with rod, steel or bronze rod, and can make a very spacious piece with very little material. Interesting thing about them, but they need to be in the right context, kind of disappear. They don't have the mass that the other pieces do.
Right. So the one that kid was hanging out inside of?
That was the toroidal solid, a toroidal piece, like a single geometric solid with a hole through it.
Okay.
Not an actual toroid, but it's toroidal. Say that 10 times.
I say, I don't even know if that's a word I've heard before, but I like it.
I might have made it up.
Hey, that works too. And I definitely couldn't say it 10 times. You had the advantage of working for some well-known artists. I would imagine when you went about trying to find a gallery to represent you, you had a little bit of information from being around those people. Do you have any advice how to pursue that?
I don't think I've ever gotten into a gallery that I tried to get into.
But they found you somewhere. You made yourself known.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened if you were hiding.
I did have a body of work that people had seen somehow through the foundry or word of mouth largely. Like when I got my foundry job, my old art teacher knew I was still making sculpture. So I was a
Mhm.
good choice for that. I just keep making stuff, and I have run into galleries that like it, and that's important. I've been in the wrong galleries before.
I would agree. If the people running the gallery aren't 100% behind your work, it's a waste of everybody's time. So, do you have any shows coming up?
At this point, I'm not really show oriented. I'm
Hmm.
just kind of plugging away one piece at a time. My last show was in 2013. I did 13 bronzes for that show. It's pretty darn expensive to put something like that together.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I haven't really pursued a one man show.
You often have works outside of your Canyon Road gallery as you enter.
And they hopefully will take this new piece as well and put it out in front of the gallery. But it's usually just one at a time. That show that I did in 2013, it was a series, a single plane based on the golden ratio, and then repeated with equilateral triangles at each end. So it's a repetition of a plane or three planes, and repeat those three planes three times. I get one shape, repeat it four times, I get another shape, repeat it five times, I get another shape. And then I repeat those shapes to make other shapes. Sometimes repeat those shapes to make other shapes.
You were talking about not being great at math and science, but science is a big inspiration in the work now.
You are correct. I'm technically uneducated. I've got high school and a little bit of college. Well, 7 or 8 years of college, but no degrees. It's a different angle. I don't really know math, but I'm using these mathematical formulas to create my work, and I'm using scientific ideas, fractal work, and biomimicry as basis.
When we hopped on Zoom, you were playing a musical instrument. I interrupted that.
That's my new little Gretsch Gin Ricky guitar.
Ooh, can we see that?
Isn't that fun?
That's beautiful.
Well, yeah. Electric. I just got a couple months ago. I have a few guitars, 6, I guess.
Collecting them.
A little bit. Yeah, I can't seem to get rid of more than one at a time, and then I get another one to replace it. So it's a kind of a losing battle. It's a great pleasure of mine to be able to sit around and play guitar with my friends.
How long have you been playing music?
I had the mandatory piano lessons when I was a kid, 7 to 10, and then started playing trombone because I got hit in the mouth with a baseball and I couldn't become a great jazz player like I had planned because my teeth were broken. And I was limited to what I could do. So I took up trombone and played that through high school and college. And then I took up guitar largely because I claimed trombone just carrying it around, hitchhiking up and down the West Coast wasn't making any sense. Wasn't something you just sit down and play on a park bench.
More mobile.
It is lighter. It's
Yeah.
hard to sing and play trombone. You can't accompany yourself.
So you're more likely to pick up the guitar and bring it to the park or wherever. Do you feel like the music influences the sculpture or vice versa?
I don't see really a relationship, but I love to play and I don't like to go places without a guitar. And the art is just something I have to do. I think about shapes when I am not making them. It's a different relationship. I play with some really great musicians. So we jam on Fridays. We've performed out a little bit. Terry Deers and Eric Chappelle, John Carr, Ramon Lobato. We mostly just jam. Playing out is very pleasurable, but it's stressful for me. Singing and playing in front of people, it's terrifying.
So you're not necessarily the musician playing in the dark by yourself. You're jamming with other people, but the joy is more the jamming aspect.
I play in the dark by myself as well.
Okay. And that's just a different experience. When you're making sculpture, do you listen to music while you're doing that, or is that more of a quiet practice?
I used to be a really big listener and I had to have music on all the time. And now I go through periods. I don't have music on constantly anymore. I'm enjoying silence a lot last couple of years. Maybe it's the COVID. I can drive all day on a road trip without anything on the radio, which
Mm.
I find interesting because I usually couldn't do a thing without having music on. But I guess I did a couple pieces in the past that were musically related. I did a series of airbrushed work on nylon organdy transparent cloth, layered lights behind. I got into representing musical scales with spiral, an octave with one rotation, another octave with bigger rotation, doubling its radius with each octave. And that was fun drawing different scales, the shape of a scale, musical scale. Well, like a chromatic scale, 13 notes, a regular spiral that doubles its radius in one rotation. But if you want to draw a major scale instead of a chromatic scale, then you've only got 8 notes. So you're skipping some of those and makes a different spiral shape.
Love all of those influences.
Yeah, me too. You've got frequencies that can sort of translate into different matter and into sound and light for that matter. It's all frequency, they all relate.
It's all connected.
And I didn't get high before this.
So when you bring up light, I am curious about your various mediums, the massive metal pieces versus the 3D printed transparent materials as someone making those things, I would imagine just the experience is different. They all feel cohesive, like the same artist, but they have their own feel.
I can make one shape in three different materials. It'll have a very different feel, or three different sizes. I like these little pieces. And when I make them huge, they're just a very different relationship to the shape. These shapes you could hold in your hand, and then the same shape maybe stand next to the dwarf by.
Right. You climb inside of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything super cool in the studio that we should see?
Can I show you my new piece?
I would love to see the new piece. You've lived a lot of different places. You were born in Korea, you lived in Bozeman and Santa Fe. I would just imagine all of those places left a little influence on your work.
I lived in Southern California as well. Well, in Santa Barbara, a year in San Diego, and that's kind of where I got into this spiral shape to go either in or out, a shape that describes motion. So I was very much influenced in Southern California, hanging around the beach.
You some surfing,
I got my ass handed to me.
but you were around the culture of it.
Was and the different plant life and ocean life in Southern California was definitely influential. Then I moved to LA in '84 and worked for Frank Gear making his sculpture, and worked for Robert Graham making his sculpture. And all these artists influenced me, not in necessarily a traceable way that I can say, oh yeah, I stole that shape from Frank Gehry, more in a way of working. Like Robert Graham, he produced these big pieces for the '84 Olympics, and it did an edition of the original size, maybe 4 feet, and then did 100 miniatures. It was just interesting to see how different artists produce their work and also can make a living.
That's always the question, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. I'm very lucky to make my living in art. When I was in high school, that's why I dedicated all my time to art. I thought you get into a gallery, you've got it made. And
And now
it,
you know there's a lot more to it than that.
yeah, it's a struggle. And it's these artists that I've worked for, it's a struggle for them. If you need 10 people to help produce your work, you still got to pay them. And the bills get bigger when your work gets bigger and more popular. But I don't have those problems right now. It's great for me to be able to produce other people's work and make money at it. And it frees me to do whatever I want for my work. I don't have to be concerned about what's going to sell. Never worried about if this will sell. This is what I make. I hope it sells.
Right. I think that's actually pretty inhibiting in that if you're making a piece and your main focus is this going to sell.
It doesn't help your creativity. Artists get stuck in making what sells. It's understandable, but it's kind of a little bit stifling in my mind. People have said, oh, you're an artist. Can you make me a cowboy or whatever? I'm like,
Right.
no, I can't. I won't. It's not what I do.
Right.
Although my first foundry job was in Montana, and we did cowboys and Indians and wildlife. That was the work that was being done, but it wasn't mine.
Saleable subject in Montana.
Maybe the only saleable subjects in Montana at that time, anyway. Cowboys and Indians and wildlife. Now, if you hit all three in one piece, there's some money to be made.
You're selling that the next day, right?
Yeah. I have thought about a side career as a Western artist, 'cause I do have that experience as well. But it's a lot of work. Those little pieces aren't that easy.
Is there any other piece of Montana that we see in your work? I know Bozeman is a great ski snowboard town.
So get me started on Bozeman, Montana, 9 months of winter and 3 months of bad skiing.
I almost moved there for that reason, but Santa Fe still has me.
Well, they get snow here every once in a while. And the ski hill is the same distance from town.
Bridger Bowl, right?
Ridge of Bowl, that's where I learned to ski when I was 12, broke my leg.
Ooh, well, it's an awesome little mountain.
Yeah, it's great. Big Sky is not bad either.
Maybe there's a little snow in some of your sculptures.
Maybe ice crystals and the patterns on the windshield,
Yeah.
2D work is a little like that. You can see these pieces behind me. Those are airbrushed.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, the green and bluish pieces
Yeah.
on either side. So, yeah. So they're digital works, but they're also airbrushed?
Well, these were earlier, so they're just airbrushed.
Oh,
Well, the,
okay.
the original leg of that green piece
Mm.
was drawn in 1991 by a friend of mine as I looked over his shoulder. 91 digital drawing was pretty simple. It hadn't gotten very far, but a friend helped me with this and I drew one leg and then made that piece with one leg of that after I printed it and reprinted it.
So, if you could travel anywhere tomorrow, you had a plane ticket, maybe you could even teleport. Is there somewhere you would want to go that you would want to influence your art?
I was in Madagascar for a month a few years ago. A friend of mine lived there for several years, and it was the most different place I've ever been to. Wonderful beaches and jungles and lemurs and baobab trees. And representational work is not really what I do, but I have a piece called Baobab uses the phi golden ratio dimensions to
Mhm.
create a tree shape. Would like to continue to be influenced by Madagascar. Wonderful country.
I have never been, and I would love to go one day.
It's mind blowing, really incredible. Wonderful music.
I would imagine that. And what year did you move to Santa Fe?
1987.
So, since you've been here since 1987, Chile, red and green, do you have a favorite between the red and the green?
I don't. The longer I live here, the more I like red, but green is kind of the staple. I like Christmas. Don't have a favorite between the two.
Maybe depends a little bit on the restaurant you're at.
Yeah. Who's got a really good adobada? Maria's has a good adobada. And Del Charo or La Choza has a great green chili stew.
But you're not opposed to the Christmas.
Oh, no. I order a lot of Christmas.
So, if you weren't just traveling and you had a time travel ticket, do you know where you would pick?
I think I'd like to go back to 1963, maybe a little earlier. Let's go back to when I was born, 58.
A particular place?
San Francisco. I think the next few years would be really fun.
San Francisco is kind of a magical place, and I would have definitely loved to have seen it at that time as well.
The Knicks and then the hippies.
If you were going to travel into the future,
Well, that's a good question. That's the hard one. I'm a little unsure. Got to be really careful because some places aren't looking that good.
maybe there's some sort of digital technology that exists in art making that doesn't exist yet. Another tool for your palette.
Oh, yeah. I would like to go where that tool is. I went to the show down in Albuquerque, not to change the subject too much, but new tools. Leah Anderson has a show at Electric Playhouse. It's all interactive stuff. They've taken her more or less two-dimensional images and made them look three-dimensional and projected them onto screens and made them interactive so they'll run away from you or they'll follow you. Or it's a really fun show. But new digital tools in art, pretty interesting. From manipulating the images to make them 3D, looking 3D to interactive. Very cool new developments in art.
Is that something you're open to?
I've already gone down that digital rabbit hole somewhat, and I'm not really a computer guy. I draw with a computer,
Right.
which makes me seem like a computer guy, but I don't know computer language. But I would love to get into more technologies, newer technologies. And in my mind, I can see how some different things could be accomplished that I've been trying to achieve in a way for years. And I've gotten into a very solid way of expressing myself using light, sound, time, all pretty good stuff.
I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities. Being open to new tools is a good thing. Maybe this sounds really out there, but a lot of the projected work feels more like music to me in that it's more temporal, right?
Yeah, it's more a time related piece. Interesting point.
It's been super fun talking, and thanks for having us in your studio this evening.
It's fun. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for watching Art in the Raw Conversations with Creative People. If you found this conversation inspiring, please tell like minded friends, like, comment, subscribe, ring the little bell, check out the links below, and have a good night, y'all.